Where is your faith? It's a rather pointed question that Jesus asks of the disciples as they try and navigate their way through the storm. I think it sort of begs the question, what is faith? It takes me back to the first Ask Me Anything session I think we did in November. And as we were winding down, we said, has anyone got any final questions? And Nal stuck his hand up and said, how do we reconcile those parts of the Bible story that conflict with modern science? It was a great question, and it's a big question. And I'm really not sure we were able to do it justice right at the end of that first session. It feels like it's become the central question around debates concerning religion in the modern world. I think if you listened to those at either extreme, whether it's strident new atheists like Richard Dawkins at one end or hardline creationists at the other, you might conclude that faith is for a band of people who are effectively soft-headed anti-intellectuals who clutch at views that simply can't be reconciled with the modern world. I think Niall asked a question we all wrestle with. A little under 3 years ago, I was confirmed, and my wife bought me a little King James Bible, a little leather-bound one. And I've got to say, at the time, I thought, what am I going to do with this? This strange assortment of seemingly impossible stories. Could I find a meaningful spiritual life amongst its pages? So when I realised that part of the Adam and Eve story was coming up in the reading cycle, it seemed like too good an opportunity to miss. Is this still a story that has something to say to us today? The last few weeks we've been talking about vision, future of the church. This very, very, very familiar story from Genesis speaks right to the heart of that. It speaks about who we are, how we relate to each other, the importance of relationship and community. We need to understand these stories, because if we don't understand how the story starts, we'll never find our place in it. So it was much to my surprise that I think one of the best guides I've actually found to such stories is a scientist. We seem to spend an awful lot of time quoting theologians at you up here. Maybe it might be nice to hear the thoughts and words of a scientist. Has anyone heard of Carl Jung? For those who don't know, he was a leading Swiss psychiatrist, and he sort of came to recognise some of the most groundbreaking psychological concepts of the last 100 years. His work revolutionised how we understand humanity and the subconscious. In many respects it makes perfect sense that psychiatrists would be very interested in the Bible. Certainly if we think of a lot of the famous Bible characters on the psychiatric couch, it seems fitting. Oh, Jonah, you've been dreaming about big fish again. There we go. But Jung described the Bible as an utterance of the soul. For him, it wrestled with all the big questions. What is evil? What is love? Why do we suffer? Now, Jung actually did come from a religious background. His father was a Lutheran pastor, and they were close, but they had a very, very, very different understanding of how Scripture worked. His father kind of clutched to old dogmas and literal readings of the famous Bible stories. His father used to say to him, "You always want to think. You ought not to think, but believe." For Carl, he had to experience and know God. Those were his words. And the Bible stories were an important part of that for him. Towards the end of his father's life, Carl Jung overheard his dad praying, and he was really wrestling and trying to clutch on to this kind of fixed and rigid faith that he had. And that really strikes me as something that's terribly sad. For Carl Jung, Holy Scripture offered something more radical, something that plays on the most fundamental aspects of our humanity through symbols and metaphors. He said we constantly use symbolic terms to represent concepts we cannot define or fully comprehend. That's one reason why religions employ symbolic language and images. Now, I appreciate for some, the idea of approaching these stories symbolically will be unsettling. But we need to delve deeply into these texts. Padding around on the surface, trying to give them stiff, literal readings, won't get us very far. There's a story of a young lady reading a Bible under a tree one day, and someone says, "What are you reading?" And she says, "I'm not reading this book, it's reading me." So how are we to approach and apply these ideas to a story like Adam and Eve? For one thing, I don't think we're looking for historical Adam. These symbolic stories aren't really about some distant historical fact. These stories are powerful because they're true again and again. You won't find a historic Adam. Because the real Adam and Eve are right here, right now, sat amongst these pews. Each of us are wrestling with the same questions that Adam and Eve represent. What kind of relationship are we going to have with our Creator? What kind of relationship are we going to have with each other? What do we know about the book of Genesis? One view is that Moses wrote it. But I think the more widely accepted view now is that it was brought together about 600 years before Christ, weaving together various ancient tales and traditions. And it was brought together by a Jewish community that was emerging from captivity in Babylon. Genesis isn't a science book. It instead sets out a radical understanding of God that is a direct response to what those people experienced in Babylon. This is the stuff of divine revelation. What made it so revolutionary? Where the Babylonians had garden temples, with gods carved in wood, forged in metal, what was offered in Genesis was something totally different. The image of God wasn't engraved on a bit of wood. Those bearing God's image were the people in the Temple of Eden, Adam and Eve. And that's the idea that's at the heart of our faith. We each bear the image of God. That's the radical notion because it transforms how we understand our relationship with our Creator and how we live with each other. When you recognize that every person you encounter is bearing the image of God, just like you do, you have to accept that they are of remarkable worth, just as you are. And the whole biblical story is about people struggling to release and free the image of God from within. I think two things really leapt out at me in relation to this passage. First, God says, it's not good for man to be alone. So there we have it. We are made to be in relationship with each other. It's not right to be alone. If the pandemic's taught us anything, it's certainly that is true. Secondly, as the chapter comes to a close, it says, Adam and Eve felt no shame. And that's the thing that undermines relationships. It's shame. We often associate the word sin with the story of Adam and Eve. So it's interesting to actually read it and realize the word used is shame. If there's one thing that modern social scientists all agree on, it's that shame is at the heart of what damages relationships. It's toxic. Carl Jung called it soul-eating emotion. It leads to eating disorders, depression, even suicide. We're hardwired to be in a community with each other, living healthy relationships. But, it's shame that pushes us apart. To experience shame is to feel diminished in the eyes of others. Shame is experienced by the marginalised and the abused, but it's something we all wrestle with. I can feel intense shame sometimes when I feel like I've fallen short as a father, as a husband, as a preacher. And while we've come to recognise the destructive nature of shame, as a sort of society, we seem to have become more addicted to it. We're keen to shame others through our public discourses. It's like shame's been weaponised. You name the discussion, whether it's vaccines, mask wearing, Brexit, sexuality, gender, religion. Those at either end of the debate usually try and silence the other through shame. They ought to be ashamed. It really does feel like we're in the midst of the storm. Certainly after this weekend, both figuratively and literally. We're going through so much upheaval and change in society. Like the disciples in the boat with Jesus, we were panicked and were scared. Master, Master, we're going to drown. That's what they said. That's the way I think we feel. The storm takes us back right to the beginning of Genesis. The earth was formless and empty, and darkness was over the deep. God is constantly pushing back the watery chaos through the Bible. Whether it's in the creation story, whether it's Noah and the ark, whether it's Moses parting the Red Sea, whether it's Jonah down in the belly of the whale. And after Jesus calms the storm, the disciples ask, "Who is this? He commands even the winds and the water." You've got to give it to the disciples. They were never afraid to ask a stupid question. It's the same God who was at the beginning in Genesis. And so when Jesus chastises them and says, "Where's your faith?" What does he mean by that? Does he mean, how are you all getting on with, stridently pushing your religious views down the throats of others or browbeating them with your Bibles? Think that's what he's meaning? I don't think so. He's asking, how are you getting on with the challenge that was set at the beginning of Genesis? How are you getting on bearing the image of God? How are you getting on recognizing the image of God in everyone else in this boat, in the storm? Because the amazing thing about the Bible is that it points outwards. It doesn't point back to itself. It points us outside, to God, to our neighbour, to ourselves. We don't read Scripture because it's like we're cramming for a literature exam. We read Scripture because it makes us more sensitive to recognising God and the sacred in our day-to-day existence. We might be trapped in the middle of the storm in that boat, but God's there with us. We're part of a community that recognises the image of God in each of us. That's how we're going to overcome shame. We don't overcome shame by pouring on more shame, but by honouring each other. We can heal some of the stigma of shame by being with those who've suffered shame. Sue honours me by being associated with me on a Sunday. We all do. That's why this is important. We're asked to honour each other. We all know what it feels like to be, for the cool kid to sit next to us at school. We feel just that little bit elevated, to be honoured. And that's what's at the heart of the gospel message. That God, the ultimate cool kid, came to be associated with us through Jesus. Through all the mess and all the shame of our day-to-day lives, we're honoured through that association. That is what faith is about. It's not some false discussion about religion and science. God's in it all. Albert Einstein said, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blindness." I think that's true. We need it all. Science is great at taking things apart and showing how it works. And faith is great at making connections and giving meaning. I've got to say, the last 3 years have been quite a roller coaster. I've learnt a lot. And today, here, might be one of the last times I stand here for a little while. But this feels like a good way to sign off. This is what I have learned. This is why this matters. So as you go about your week, were you getting irritated with a colleague? Irritated with members of your own family? Look them in the face and ask yourself, where is your faith? Next month, the church is going to be doing the Living in Love and Faith course, which is all about sexuality, gender, identity. And if you're attending that course and you're struggling to fight back the urge to shout down someone you really don't agree with, ask yourself, where's your faith? As we struggle through these things, maybe come back to Scripture. It doesn't contain neat bits of dubious science that need to be protected. It's not what it pretends to be. It's a book of wisdom. It's not here to fill you with information. It's here to transform you. So I'll end with a short prayer. Lord, may we come to understand and believe what we read. But most importantly, may we become what we believe.